Hello, Ryan here. Me and Pete aren't in this week, so here's an Out of Office episode which we recorded earlier. History happened everywhere. Out of Office. A random place, a random time, and a topic pulled from the hat. The challenge? Find the fascinating, uncover the unexpected, and share the stories. You're listening to... History happened everywhere. Out of Office. Hello, my name is Ryan Weir, and I am here in the HHE studio with the bucket to my spade. It's Mr. Peter Goddard.
Hello, Ryan. How are you?
I am very well, Peter. I am currently sunning myself on a beach somewhere.
Oh, that sounds great. I hope I'm there too.
Well, yeah. For this Out of Office episode, Peter, the Derzolator has given us Fatherhood in Algeria during the Paleozoic. So, Peter, this is your episode. Tell us, what have you got in store for us?
What do we have in store? We have shifting continents, evolving creatures, death on a colossal and global scale, climate change, volcanoes, the first tentative steps of life out of the oceans and onto dry land. Welcome to the Paleozoic, and welcome to a tiny bit of land squished in the middle of it all that would eventually become Algeria. And welcome to a very special guest. Given we have the topic of fatherhood today, we've been joined by one of my favourite fatherhood bloggers, in fact, literally the only fatherhood blogger I know, the star of BewilderedDad.com, it's Mr. Jim Coulson. Welcome.
Oh, I'm glad I come above the Paleozoic on the billing. That's exciting.
This is a very modern dad, but we will be looking for your views on how single-cell creatures might go about their fatherly duties.
Hey, it's the role I was born to play, so...
Well, shall we begin?
Let's do it, Peter.
Right, well, we've actually been to Algeria before, which is our country. This was in episode 21, which is Nature in Algeria, 1940 to 1950. That was a while ago, so let's have a little refresh of the memory.
Okay.
It's the People's Democratic Republic of Algeria, which is a country in North Africa in what's known as the Maghreb, which is a strip across the top north and northwest of Africa, with Mauritania, Morocco to the west, and Libya to the east, stops just short of Egypt. All that sort of northern Africa area is the Maghreb, and a big chunk of it is Algeria. It's kind of due south of France and the eastern half of Spain, so straight below those two. So it's about a quarter to a fifth of the North African coastline, which doesn't sound massive, but then it projects down and expands out into a huge area in the Sahara Desert.
Okay.
And in fact, it is the largest nation in Africa. It's the 10th largest in the world, in fact.
Which is astonishing, isn't it? Because it doesn't raise its head very often on the global scale that, that its size implies.
Yeah, it's got a lot of space, but a lot of that is Sahara Desert, so I guess they're not building it too much on it at the moment, I think. Maybe in the future sometime things might change. In fact, as we know from the previous episode, once upon a time, that wasn't desert at all. It was lush land, so who knows what'll happen in the future.
Robots.
Very...
Sweeping herds of robots.
Well, it's 2.3 million square kilometres, 920,000 square miles, 4.3 Frances to an Algeria. It's much bigger than France.
So you could give it 4 Frances in an Algeria. That's amazing, isn't it? That's huge.
Yeah, it's if you paste it over the top of Europe, it's a good chunk of Europe.
Huh.
Flag-wise, green and white vertical halves with a red crescent and star in the middle, giving you the hint that it may be an Islamic nation, which it is. And let's have a little listen to the national anthem, shall we?
Yeah, let's do that. It's very martial.
Upbeat, martial.
Yeah.
And you want to be cheery when you head into the battle.
It's nice, nice holiday vibe to it, I think. Because you could imagine walking down the prom, across that coastline, listening to this.
Down the boardwalk.
Or wearing those stripy blazers that they wore in the olden days.
A straw boater.
Oh yeah, with big moustaches, perfect.
Well, so let me tell you a little bit about this. This was written by Mufti Zakaria, who was an Algerian nationalist, and this was when Algeria was a French colony. He was being held in Barbarousse prison for being an Algerian nationalist when it was frowned upon by the French. And in prison, he had no pen or paper. He wrote the words, not the tune. He had no pen or paper, so allegedly Zakaria wrote the lyrics of the national anthem in his own blood on the walls of the jail cell.
Oh my gosh, writing it in your own blood.
I mean, that is commitment to the tune, right? But it's called Kassaman, or the Oath.
That's an auspicious beginning, though, isn't it, to a national anthem?
Yeah, it's a solid story to have behind your national anthem. I can't help but suspect I personally would have just tried to remember it.
Yeah, you've got to be not very confident in your memory abilities. You must be a bit tired, and I'm going to have to go for the second option, which is the blood, and just see how it goes.
We're going to move cells. Oh, no, really? Can I take this wall with me? Nevertheless, that is the anthem, and a jolly good one it is too, I feel.
Yeah, I like that one. Upbeat.
So now Algeria has a long history. It starts, unsurprisingly, with early man, but we did cover it in the last Algeria episode 21.
We did.
So I'm not going to go into too much detail, but broadly speaking, early man arrives. He drew on some cave walls. The Sahara became more deserty than it was to start with. Some civilization starts up. The Phoenician Empire, the Roman Empire, the Umayyad Islamic Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the French Empire, and independence. Nevertheless, I will give you a couple of famous Algerians to top it off. It gets complicated with these French colonies because these are people you would more commonly think of as French, but they were born in Algeria. Albert Camus.
I'm guessing a footballer.
He is, in fact, a writer.
But he was a goalkeeper.
In fact, I'm going to...
No, he was.
Oh, really?
Genuinely true. Genuinely true. Famous goalkeepers you don't expect, Pope John Paul II and Albert Camus.
Right, thank you.
I didn't expect either of those. You are exactly right.
That's why Jim is here.
It's adding value already. This has been a great investment.
Thanks,
I
Dan.
only know famous ex-goalkeepers. That's all. That's
okay,
my
right.
area of expertise.
Well, this the fashion icon who may or may not have been a goalkeeper, we're about to find out. Yves Saint Laurent? Goalkeeper or no?
More midfield general, I think.
But that is Algeria.
Hey, Pete.
Hey, Ryan.
So, you know how we've been to Algeria before? For one of our episodes?
Yeah. It was episode 21, I think.
Yeah, that's the one. Well, I was listening back to it the other day, and we sounded really different.
Different? How's that?
Yeah, I guess it was like early days, but we just sounded fresher and younger.
Really? Is it really that different?
Yeah, listen to this.
History happens everywhere. Hello, my name is Ryan Weir. I'm here in the HHE studio with a butter to my toast, Mr. Peter Goddard. Hello, Ryan. How are you? I'm very good, thank you. Do you want to talk about Algeria? Yes, I would like that. Okay. I don't think we sound any different today. No, I suppose not.
Okay, so now you know where you are, North Africa, the Maghreb. But let's think about when we are. This was quite key to why this was in some ways challenging as an episode to do a specific country, because the Paleozoic era was a very long time ago. To give you some clues, paleo means older or ancient, so you're going back a bit. Now, the word paleo is the old, and it's there's actually two geological, historical, archaeological, whatever you want to call it, time periods that have paleo in the name. Okay. It's easy to get them confused. So there is the Paleolithic, which is old, is the paleo, but the lithic is stone. So that's the old Stone Age. So you're talking about 11,000 to 3.3 million years ago. This is where early man was around using knapped stone tools. So the Paleolithic, old stone, is when first men were appearing and chipping things into tools, basically.
Sure.
That's not us, but that's kind of what I was first thinking of, and very nearly did a lot of unnecessary research on. But that we're talking about the Paleozoic. So paleo is old still, but the zoic is relating to animals. So zoic.
Oh, okay.
Basically, this is the oldest time there were animals.
Right.
That's how far we're going back. So Paleolithic is men using tools. This is first animals appear, basically.
So which one is the paleo diet based on?
The paleo diet is what would men have eaten in early man days when they didn't have Tesco's.
Yeah, I guess single-celled organisms for your lunch, dinner, breakfast is not going to be very attractive. I mean, it will make you thinner.
It's an algae-heavy diet, I think.
I'm sure Gwyneth Paltrow's tried to pitch that.
Yes, that'll be £400 for a kilo of moss.
Cake moss.
But the other difference is Paleozoic is a period, I think, which is much shorter duration than an era, which is what we're talking about. So the Paleolithic is one of the larger units of geological time, which is an era. And there are, depending on how you measure it, there are sort of four of these, starting with pre-Cambrian time. everything from the Big Bang, so the start, to 542 million years ago.
Okay, so they're literally from the start of everything to there's an Earth.
There is an Earth, and vast majority of the time there's no life on it. It's a rock of various compositions. And at the very end of the Precambrian, you might see some single-celled organisms. You might see a little bit of a jellyfish coming up, but that's your lot.
Okay.
And I think originally they thought there were no animals at all, but these new ones are slightly more recent discoveries, so they're creeping into the pre-Paleozoic, first old animal period. So that's the Precambrian.
Yeah.
That's your beginning. Then it's us, the Paleozoic. This is known sometimes as the Age of Trilobites. Cockroachy-looking fellas that you see, the classic fossil, I would call them.
Yeah. Jim, Trilobite or Trilobite?
Trilobite, why not? I mean, I've made that decision on the hoof. But I mean, talking about fatherhood, when my kids ask me a question I don't know, I'll just go with one and sound confident. And they'll believe it.
It worked on me, to be honest with you.
Trilobite.
I'm going with it. Maybe it's because he supported me. Trilobite it is. It's official.
All right.
So this is 542 million to 250 million years ago. So normally we struggle to keep within the decade. I've got 280 million years to play with here, which meant I could find a couple of things to talk about, but not many personal stories, funnily enough. Things are livening up on Earth with an explosion of life, starting with the smaller creatures, trilobites and ammonites. And you start to see animals, right? Creatures start to pop out of the water. And we'll talk about more about the Paleozoic after this introduction to the eras.
Okay.
So that brings us to the Mesozoic Era, 250 million years ago, also known as the Age of Dinosaurs. So we are pre-dinosaur, but then the dinosaurs show up, romp around the place, munching on each other and generally doing Jurassic Park type things.
I'm going to anger some scientists and say that that's the best time, isn't it?
Right. Well, you'll recognise even the periods within the Mesozoic, which are the Triassic, Jurassic and Cretaceous. Those are classic dinosaur periods, right? So, the end of the Mesozoic, what's that in the sky? Oh, it's a big meteor and it's coming this way. Oh, no, boom. Everyone's dead. Oh, no, that's a shame. And then we're into the Cenozoic. The Cenozoic is the age of mammals. So we've had the age of trilobites, we've had the age of dinosaurs, now we're into the age of mammals. The little hairy guys take the wheel of the world, rather. They spread all over the world. Some of them evolve into early man, so that it can appear in quality podcasts. And some of those actually evolve into podcasters like ourselves. And because the Cenozoic is the last of the eras, and we are in it right now. That's the era we are in today.
The Cenozoic.
The Cenozoic.
How come I didn't know that then? How come I don't know what age or era I'm in? Where am I?
I mean, it's not on the masthead of most newspapers. It's a Cenozoic quaternary period.
Cenozoic Times would be a great newspaper though, right?
Cenozoic Times.
That's great.
All the latest since the last mass extinction.
Yeah.
So there you go. Those are the 4 eras, and we are basically the first era where anything interesting is happening.
It's where it all begins, like fatherhood.
Don't worry, I'll be crowbarring fatherhood in later.
It was very kind that you tried, though.
Right, Algeria in the Paleozoic.
Okay.
First off, it's important to realise that obviously Algeria as a country didn't exist in the Paleozoic. But you also need to know that Africa as a continent didn't exist in the Paleozoic.
Wait, really?
There was an entirely different shaped world, basically, back in this day. There was a landmass available to tourists about 550 million years ago called Gondwana, a supercontinent it's known as. I think there's
Gondwana.
Gondwana.
I bet that means something like fatherland or something.
Oh, well, I should have checked that, shouldn't I?
Be a handy in, wouldn't it?
The name Gondwana is derived from a tribe in India, Gonds, and Wana meaning land of. Gondwanaland is superficially divided into a western half, Africa and South America, and an eastern half, India, Sri Lanka, Madagascar, Antarctica, and Australia. Together this forms the Gondwanaland Supercontinent. Thank you.
So when you imagine Gondwana, imagine basically shoving the continents as you know them around the globe until you smush them all together like a very primitive jigsaw puzzle. Okay. So the kind of east coast of Gondwana is North and South America smushed together. Then it runs down into Antarctica, smushed onto the bottom of that, and then it curls round into Australia and and Antarctica. The north of North America, Russia and China are smushed on the top. Then Africa is to the right or to the east, very middle of this continent. And to the right of that, to the east of that, is the Arabian Peninsula. peninsula. All of it just smushed into one big landmass called Gondwana. But there's a really good drawing I found that actually has the countries as we know them marked on an image of the Gondwana map.
Oh, that's useful.
So basically, Africa is inland. Algeria is consequently the northernmost tip of an inland strip in the middle of Gondwana. It has some coast because what is now the Mediterranean Sea is a big lake, but the other half of it is attached to the bottom of Spain.
Wow.
So basically, there isn't an Algeria as we know it, unsurprisingly. There isn't even an Africa. There is just Gondwana. So we could say that the father of Algeria in the Paleozoic was Gondwana.
Yeah.
Now, eventually Gondwana splits into a new supercontinent called Pangaea that you may have heard of, and that then also breaks into the continents and landmasses we recognise today.
So all this land is in one part of the Earth, right?
Yes.
The rest of the Earth is just all water, isn't it?
I think there is some land, like islands and things. I don't think it's 100% water, but yeah, basically.
All the continents were together in one lump on one side of the planet. That makes me wonder why. Like, why is all the land just in that one area?
Well, arguably, it's sort of an inevitability because there is also a school of thought that suggests that the continents will keep going until they create another supercontinent. So they'll all crash into each other again in about 200 million years and create there's a few theories, but there's Pangaea Proxima, Amasia, Novo Pangaea, or Orica, are various speculated supercontinents in our future.
Quite good for us in the UK because if we can't get a flight, we could drive on holiday to some exciting places. So.
Yeah, it renders the channel entirely pointless.
Does. Bring it on, I say.
I too believe in returning to Europe, but I don't want to wait 200 million years to do it.
Hey, if it's worth doing, it's worth waiting for.
So there we have it. Algeria, there is no Algeria, but we could pick it out on a map, and it is inland in the middle.
Yeah, it's not like underwater or anything, is it?
No,
it's right there and things are on it.
Yes, and that was helpful for us, as you're about to find out in the next bit.
After this.
Okay, so let's talk about the Paleozoic.
Why don't you talk about it? Because I've got very little to add.
Jim, I've invited you. So the Paleozoic covers a huge amount of time. It's 289 million years. It's time in which Earth's life changes dramatically. Earth itself changes dramatically. I said Gondwana was land, but actually through this era, this is when everything's moving around. So even our Algeria is on the move throughout our period. It's sufficiently long for an entire continent to drift across the Earth a little bit. And so I'm going to give you a quick whistle-stop tour of the periods that make up the era.
Okay.
So the Paleozoic starts with the Cambrian period. Cambrian period is very important. It's named after Cambria, the Latin name for Wales. It's known for an explosion of life on Earth. You may have heard of the Cambrian explosion.
I have.
It's an important topic and discovery, I suppose, for the science of evolution. It's a period where you see suddenly loads of different life forms in the fossil beds. There is some debate about whether there really was a Cambrian explosion or whether conditions were just really good for...
Aliens.
Aliens.
No, that's serious though, isn't it?
Jim, do you want to handle this one? Do some fathering.
Okay. Yes, that's nice.
No, I mean like aliens, like comets and stuff, rocks from space that had bacteria or whatever on it. What's it called? Something spermia? No.
Is it panspermia?
Is this
panspermia? That's the word. Thank you.
A genuine theory or a genuine thing that happened? Or?
No, this is we don't know for fact, but yeah, there is a theory that life on Earth, or life all over the universe, is all merged around by comets and things that explode. I feel like I'm making this all up. I don't know what's true and what's not anymore.
They've called this panspermia.
Yes.
And they did that because they thought people who say this are going to sound a bit crazy. Let's make them sound
even
just a little bit more crazy.
Creepy at the same time.
A little bit weird. Like you wouldn't want to really hang out with them too much.
That is one version. There is a version of life on Earth where they actually in a lab experimented and found if you struck lightning in a primordial soup of some kind, you could actually generate amino acids, which is kind of the building blocks of proteins and the sort of the origin of life. So there's that's the theory that lightning may have actually started it all off as well.
That's an exciting laboratory to work in, where you're shooting lightning bolts at primordial soup. What do you do for a living? Well, play God.
So anyway, we start with the Cambrian period, the Cambrian explosion, loads of arthropods, so the ancestors of sort of insecty, crustacean-y creatures, and chordates, animals with spinal cords, start to emerge. So that's the Cambrian explosion. Then there's the Ordovician period. This sees life really broaden out. It's called the Ordovician radiation. So the explosion of life in the Cambrian then just, I guess, travels around the waters of the Earth. The Trilobite is really the organism to be at this period. They last for about 270 million years as a creature, which is pretty good going, I'd say.
Wait. Not individually.
No.
As a species,
As a species,
right?
you can find trilobites that cover 270 million years of the fossil record. Not there's one called John, who's basically at the end going, "Oh, I've seen it all."
Well, no, you say that, but there are some, like some squids, right? Some jellyfish can live forever. Why do I feel like a mass crazy
You're
person
to Crazy Casts with Ryan Weir. So, to recap, aliens seeded life on Earth and squids live forever.
Oh, Ryan, I didn't realise that you'd done this episode. You'd researched this meticulously.
There is some that are just move on.
Naked mole rats don't age. That might be what you're thinking of.
No, but there's others. Jellyfish and stuff don't age. Or they do, but then as they die, they then come back to life.
I'm thinking there's a whole mythology building up around Ryan here.
Are you thinking of the ghosts in Pac-Man?
Oh, no, wait. Yeah, no, now you mention it.
Okay, so we have Cambrian explosion, Ordovician radiation as everything spreads out. Then the Silurian period, which sees coral. Coral is the big thing in the Silurian period.
Hold that thought. Right, to date, there is only one species that has been called biologically immortal, the jellyfish, Turritopsis dormil, small transparent animals that hang out in oceans around the world and can turn back time by reverting to an earlier stage of their life cycle. So
Who's crazy now?
maybe there was a trilobite that lived for 270 million years.
Maybe. We shall get him on the next on the verdict.
If it was a dad trilobite, it might have just felt like it was 270 million years old because I hadn't had any sleep for a long time. That's how I feel.
Right, so Cambrian, Ordovician, Silurian. Coral is your big life form, but also this is the period where life creeps onto land. You start seeing the first evidence of vascular plants on the coastal lowlands. So prior to this, the sea's where it's at. Everyone needs water, so you stay in the sea. You don't want to get out. It's hot and dangerous out there. But now, starting to see a bit of plantage creeping up on the coast. So Algeria, of course, is going to be pretty quiet at the moment because it's still inland, right, and Gondwana, but nevertheless, stuff starting to move inland. And then we have the Devonian, also known sometimes as the Age of Fishes.
Yeah.
This sees the beginning of four-legged amphibians and the beginning of vertebrates colonizing the land. So stuff's creeping onto land now through the Devonian. Then we're on to the Carboniferous, which is answer to the question, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Because long before the chicken was even a glint in Charles Darwin's eye, the first eggs were being laid in the Carboniferous period by tetrapods, four-legged vertebrates, things with spines. So this is an important development in evolution world because previously your eggs would dry out basically. So there were eggs before, it's not the invention of the egg, but you had to have them in water, otherwise they'd dry out and desiccate and die. So these are eggs that have an amniotic sac so they can retain the moisture and have nutrients in them. So now suddenly you don't have to have your babies via eggs through the sea, you can have them on land somewhere, and that means you can start colonizing further inland.
Okay, that makes sense.
So that's how you became a father, wasn't it? An egg of some kind? I'm not a parent myself. I don't know how it works.
I think so. That's what the stork told me when it came around.
I have a question.
Absolutely, go ahead.
In the period where it was like single-celled organisms, right?
Yes.
Was there decomposition? Was stuff like dying and then not getting like eaten up by bacteria and stuff?
So there is
Did stuff decompose?
Well, there is decomposition is a really important question, though, funnily enough, that you've raised, because the arrival of plants on land at first, things weren't decomposing because the funguses hadn't evolved to decompose them on land. So there was a period where nothing would decompose, and then finally the fungus arrived on land, and that helped soil and the sort of cycle of life and nitrogen and into the soil and all of that kind of thing. But in the single-cell world, I'm afraid I have no answers for you. Jim, you're a dad. Do you want to make something up?
No, there was no decomposition. It was just a really good... When the decomposers arrived, they just had a lot to do because there was a lot of stuff that hadn't decomposed. So they really had a great time.
You're so wise.
There you have it.
Thanks, Dad.
You're really useful to have around, man.
It's fine. I can talk rubbish all day.
Right, so now the final period of our age. So we had the Cambrian, the Ordovician, the Silurian, the Devonian, the Carboniferous, and finally the Permian. The warm seas are teeming with life now. Coral reefs are flourishing. There's fish, shelled creatures, crabby things running around. On the land, you've got conifers and ginkgo trees, proper trees coming in. You've got animals on the land. They don't look exactly like the animals we know, but there's animals as we might understand them. So you're looking at a scene that's almost familiar in a way, albeit a little bit different and a little bit shifted. It seems like a really good time to wipe everything out. And the Permian ends 250 million years ago with the Permian Triassic Extinction event.
Wow. Okay.
90 to 96% of life on Earth completely destroyed.
So, I mean, literal just start from scratch.
Pretty much start from scratch. So there's some debate. No one's quite sure exactly how it happened or what the deal was. So you know the one that happened at the end of the dinosaurs, there was a meteor that came down north of Mexico. And they're pretty confident of that. They're less confident, I think, of the Permian extinction reasons. But one of the main theories is a bunch of volcanoes in Siberia called the Siberian Traps all exploded. And they chunked out a huge quantity of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere.
Okay.
Raised the temperature, which reduces the oxygen carrying capacity of the sea. So nothing in the sea can breathe anymore, so they all die. And then the food chain being what it is, basically everything dies. Everything gets too hot, there's not enough oxygen, and basically everything bar 4 to 10% of the creatures die.
Yeah, if it's volcanoes, then you've also got like ash in the air as well, right? For
Yes.
potentially thousands of years.
So this is carbon dioxide in the atmosphere causing climate change.
See, that happened the summer that Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein, is that there was a
The
massive...
extinction of all life.
Well, not quite the same. But there was, I can't remember the name of the volcano, but it exploded and ash went everywhere. And it's called the summer where there was no summer or whatever. And that's why they were not out enjoying the lakes of Switzerland when they were out there. They were inside because it was horrible and rainy and dark and horrible.
Oh, wow.
And they wrote their stories, and she wrote Frankenstein. She came up with that. And it was just a terrible summer. People's crops failed. There was poverty and starvation all over the world.
I wonder what inspired such a gothic horror.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't the summer that inspired Where's Wally, was it? That was a different summer.
So there you have it. That is the story of the Paleozoic Era. So I'll just give you one more time. Cambrian, Ordovician, Silurian, Devonian, Carboniferous and Permian. Boom, everybody dies. Now, looking at those periods, you will, with your colossal general knowledge, have noticed a pattern.
They all end in Ian.
That is one of the patterns, but that is not what I'm looking for. So the Cambrian is named after Cambria, the Latin word for Wales. The Ordovician is named after an ancient Celtic tribe, the Ordovices. The Silurian is named after a Welsh tribe, the Silures. The Devonian is named after Devon, in the southwest of England. The Carboniferous is called that because the rocks from that area created a load of rich coal seams in England. And the Permian is named after the region of Perm in Russia. So, barring the Permian, everything has a very British twang to it, does it not?
It does.
This is starting to sound like the story of most history now. And this is millions of years ago.
This is millions of years ago, but there is a reason why all of these periods are named after things British. And I'm going to introduce you to a gentleman called Adam Sedgwick.
I'd love it if he just walked in right now.
Hello! That would be a trick, because Adam Sedgwick was a geologist, a British geologist, and an Anglican priest. He is arguably one of the founders of modern geology. He was born in 1785. So if he was going to walk in, he would be animatronic at best. He was born in Dent, in Yorkshire.
Oh.
I believe you're a Yorkshire fellow.
I am. I have no idea where that is.
Well, you'll have to go seek it out.
There's Denton, near where I live. But
Maybe it's that.
Take a road trip for us.
I will do.
So he was born in 1785, like I say, in Yorkshire, but he goes off to university at Cambridge, where he studies mathematics and theology. So in 1818, he was elected to be the Woodwardian Lecturer, which is later a professorship, in geology. And this is surprising for two reasons. First is, in order to hold the post, the rules of the Woodwardian Lectureship was that the holder has to be celibate.
What's that got to do with it?
The founder of the post stipulates this because the post holder has to give 4 lectures a year.
Wow.
And then he has to be celibate, quote, lest the care of a wife and children should take the lecturer too much from the study and the care of the lecturer.
Wow, it's borderline religion, isn't it?
So, Jim, you're a father. Do you think you could squeeze 4 lectures a year in despite your progeny?
Well, maybe this is why I'm not lecturing. I'm not big on the lecture circuit because of those kids. I'll tell when I get home, I'm going to berate them for that.
See, you could have been celibate and been a foundational geologist. In practice, I think it actually meant he had to be an ordained minister. But nevertheless, the founder was quite specific about celibacy, which is quite the move.
Also, I wonder how long those lectures actually were, because it could be proper 12-hour lectures you've got to talk about. It's probably not an hour, is it?
I don't think you could just sort of casually extemporise, here's a rock, looks grey. But the second reason that I was slightly surprised that our man Sedgwick was elected to the Woodwardian lecturer in geology was that he had never done any geology of any kind. He had precisely zero experience and no training in geology when he got this position. He had one rival for the position, a guy called George Cornelius. He did know about geology, and about him, Sedgwick said, I had but one rival, and he had not the slightest chance against me, for I knew absolutely nothing of geology, whereas he knew a good deal, but it was all wrong.
He's a Yorkshireman as well, and Yorkshire folk are well known for just thinking that they're right about everything. So actually, this does fit with history. So
I can skip a stone.
So yes, he gets this lectureship. I guess he realises he perhaps ought to gen up a little bit on the facts of geology. In fact, he says, I have never turned a stone. Henceforth, I will leave no stone unturned.
Oh.
Is that where the phrase comes from?
No, I think he was using the phrase, but
Okay.
I have never turned a stone. Seems like a weak entrance to that, to be honest with you. But he's as good as his word. He becomes very good at geology, as it happens. Talented person, as all people from Yorkshire are, I hear.
Well, I hear he also had a lot of time on his hands.
Yes, he did.
Welcome back to Who Wants to Be Rich? Adam Sedgwick here has a cheque for £500,000, but we don't want to give you that because we're playing the £1 million question. Adam, for £1 million, the question is, pegmatite is a type of what? Is it A, a tree, B, an amphibian, C, a musical instrument, or D, a rock?
Oh, by heck, that's a tough one. I'll have to use me 50-50.
Really? Okay, well, let's take away 2 of the incorrect answers. And we're left with a musical instrument or a rock.
Oh, blimey, I thought it was going to be one of the others. Can I phone a friend?
Okay, who do you want to call?
Can I call George Cornelius?
Okay, and how do you know George?
Oh, he was the fella I beat for the geology job.
Let's call him up.
Hello?
Now then, George, it's Adam Sedgwick. You know, the one who got the job.
What do you want?
What's a pegmatite? Is it a musical instrument or a rock?
Why are you calling me?
Look, I've only got 10 seconds and it's worth £1 million.
Oh, I see. Well, as you know, I've studied geology for many years, unlike yourself, so I can tell you quite categorically that it is a musical instrument.
Oh, that's champion. When I've won, there's $100,000 coming your way.
Wait, what? No, wait.
So this was a time, you have to bear in mind, geology was a very young science. It barely existed, frankly. And it heavily was influenced by the Bible. So they were looking, when they looked at the ground, for evidence of the flood from the book and evidence of things that happened in the Bible. So it becomes increasingly obvious over his career as he learns more and more about geology. He starts out, and his biblical geology is about looking for evidence of floods, basically, and these sort of biblical disasters. But he's a true scientist because over time, he starts out being a biblical guy, but he thinks, do you know what, this doesn't fit, this doesn't work. And eventually he just changes his mind. The evidence is such that he goes, do you know what, this just doesn't fit. And in 1831, he has a presidential address to the Geological Society. And he recants all of his biblical beliefs and says, this is wrong, it just doesn't work. He says, having once been myself a believer and to the best of my power a propagator of what I now regard as philosophic heresy, I think it right as one of my last acts before I quit this chair, thus publicly to read my recantation. So I find this really admirable. You spend years and years and years thinking one thing to actually realise, do you know what, I've been wrong all this time, and then stand up and say it. I believe it was in a cathedral when he did it as well. And I think there was a dinner afterwards where nobody came because he really made himself super unpopular with this. But I just think that's a testament to good science. So well done, Mr. Sedgwick.
Yeah, well done, Mr. Sedgwick.
This is not his first entanglement, if you will, with science and religion coming up against each other, because one of his students in geology was Mr. Charles Darwin.
Who?
Jim,
Do you want a Yorkshire Charles Darwin fact?
please do.
When he wrote his big book, he hid in Ilkley, which is near where I live in Yorkshire, because he was worried that religious people would be really cross with him, and they were. But he hid. So
He hid.
yeah, he came away, and at that time, Ilkley society was a little bit smaller.
I see.
And so he said he was going to take the Spa waters, but he didn't. He just went there, hid away.
Wow.
Is it as nice today as it was in Darwin's time?
Yeah, it's even better. There's a Betty's now, which is a lovely little tea room. So there you go.
So anyway, he continues to do geology in a much more scientific way, and he conducts fieldwork in Scotland, in the Lake District, Northern England, and North Wales, often with a collaborator, a friend called Sir Roderick Impey Murchison. It's a name to conjure with, isn't it? My favourite fact about Sir Roderick Impey Murchison is that it was described by one website as he had given up fox hunting in order to study geology.
Well, you got to give up something.
How much time was this guy spending fox hunting? I guess it's like the having children thing. That suddenly
A wise man once told me you can't get what you want without sacrifice. And you know what? He was willing to give up the tearing apart of wild animals.
To start tearing apart wild rocks.
Yes, exactly.
I can imagine there's a fox in the bush going, geology is really interesting.
Just leaving interesting rocks on the path for him to find.
So in 1835, the two men, Murchison and Sedgwick, present a joint paper under the title On the Silurian and Cambrian Systems, where they name and explain the Silurian and Cambrian systems. They established the Devonian period. Murchison himself established the Permian. Unfortunately, the two of them had a bit of a row and they had a falling out, so they stopped working together eventually. So as a result, I've got to pick a side, right? So I'm going to say, it seems to me that Adam Sedgwick of Yorkshire, he was the one who coined the term Paleozoic.
Yeah.
So I am going to declare him the title Father of the Paleozoic.
I think that's admirable that you made that choice. It must have been very difficult. You must have been between a rock and a hard place.
Jim, do something.
What?
Well, this is awkward, isn't it?
Okay, so what can we find in Algeria in the Paleozoic? This was the challenge.
Oh, yeah.
I have
forgotten about Algeria.
scuttled sideways into Yorkshire there because it was a great story and I thought it was worth sharing. So I can give you a review of the fossil record of fossils that have been found in Algeria in the Paleozoic or from the Paleozoic.
Okay.
There are 5 of them.
Really? Just 5?
5 of them. There's Eurytis doliaris, which is a fast-moving carnivore.
Oh.
Sounds pretty exciting, doesn't
Yeah.
it? It's exciting until you realise that it's an ammonoid cephalopod. So an ammonoid is a type of mollusk.
Okay.
So now think snails and clams.
Okay.
Cephalopod literally means foot head. Cephalo is head, pod is foot, which means they have a foot that emanates from the head. So octopuses, cuttlefishes, head straight into the leg kind of thing. So, but closer to what we would call, we know as a nautilus today, the shell with a kind of leg sticking out of it a little bit.
Okay.
So basically, this is the fossil, the other fossil. So the Trilobite is the cockroachy looking thing that's the classic fossil. This is the other classic fossil, kind of like a spiral snail shell.
Oh, I see those are everywhere.
Everywhere, right? So that's the classic. So that's the first of the Paleozoic fossils from Algeria. Then there's Eurytis Permutes, which is an ammonoid cephalopod with a fossil that looks kind of like a spiral shell. The third one is Muensteroceras multitudum. Now that is an ammonoid cephalopod with a fossil that looks like a kind of a spiral shell.
Interesting.
Nice. Now the Heliocyclus inornatus, that is it's an ammonoid cephalopod actually,
Right.
And it's got a fossil that looks kind of like a spiral shell.
A spiral shell.
Yeah,
you say?
yeah.
Spiral this time.
It is, yeah. So, and the last one is the Cucina falcifera, which, and this is going to surprise you. Right. It's an ammonoid cephalopod that has a kind of spiral shell.
Wow.
So I couldn't tell the difference between any of them.
Well, you see, you might think that being the keeper of the Paleozoic fossils in Algeria would be an easy job because there's only 5 to look after. But when you're trying to explain which one's which to the visitors,
Yeah, that's true. If you
Tough.
dropped if you drop the labels, you're in a lot of trouble.
This is the plot to the new Mr. Bean, isn't it?
But actually, I almost brought you a real rabbit hole of ammonite study because to me, these things all looked absolutely identical. But then I found out that there's an absolute huge amount of science in looking at the width of the shell, the bulges on the shell, the number of whorls on the shell, the spiral, the direction of the spiral, the bulging of the spiral from in cross-section, the shape of the shell chambers. Basically, people who are into ammonites are looking at those 5 and going, well, you must be mad to think they look the same. But none of that tells us anything about fatherhood. So,
True.
I got in touch with Dave at Paleocast.
Hello and welcome back to Paleocast. I'm Liz Martin Silverstone.
And I'm Dave Marshall.
Hey, Dave.
Paleocast is a paleontology podcast. It's paleocast.com, I believe. And he turned me on to a particular episode of their podcast, which is episode 11, Sexual Selection in the Fossil Record.
Well, this sounds like it's gone a bit late night for my liking. I wasn't warned about this.
Well, buckle up, guys. This is where they talk to a guy called Rob Nell at the Queen Mary University of London. He's a biologist who normally works with beetles, but took an interest in fossils. Now, I'm going to take you through what I learned from a small amount of what I learned from that podcast. If you're interested in the next 5 minutes of this show, do check out the full episode of Paleocast. It's very interesting, and it will be an opportunity for you to hear the words sexual ornaments and animal weaponry. If that doesn't make you want to hear more, I don't know what will. So let's talk about sex, shall we?
Sex times. Let's talk about the sexy times. Sex.
This next segment is called Who's the Daddy? How do you know who's the father in any given relationship?
You've got the same eyes. So if you've got ammonite eyes, then then you can tell you're the father of a fossil.
Ah, okay, right. So one of the big challenges about talking about fatherhood in particular in the Paleozoic is actually identifying who is mum and who is dad even. So you can't tell which of these fossils is male or female normally. Or can you? So the challenge comes in a couple of ways in the fossil record. And the first is that there's not a lot of fossils. So normally when you look at animals, you look at a lot of them and go, oh, look, all of the men are brown and all of the women are green. Therefore, the sexual dimorphism, it's called, the ways you look different based on your sex, suggests that men are brown, females are green. Fossils, you only have 1 or 2 fossils, and suddenly you don't have that sort of comparison. So that's your first problem, is even having enough samples to understand which one is which. The second is when there is strong sexual dimorphism, so there is a big difference between the male and the female, it's very, very easy to find a fossil and just think it's a different species because it looks really different. So you take this creature and you go, oh, look, this is a massive beaked creature and this is a tiny beaked creature. They're different creatures, but actually it's the male and female of the same species. So this actually happened with the moa in New Zealand. Moa is a big emu-ish attack bird, I would describe it as. When they first found fossils of this, it was recently extinct, it's not Paleozoic, but they found the fossils and they thought they'd assigned them different species. And then DNA testing came along and went, whoa, this is just a boy and a girl. They just happen to look super different. So that's your problem of finding out and identifying sex in the fossil record. But this is where we get to the Paleozoic. If you look at the fossil of one particular trilobite, which seems appropriate, it's the age of trilobites, you can find something interesting. The Wallicerops trifurcatus is a type of trilobite. It's a fossil that's been found in the rocks of Morocco, which is just next door to Algeria. So I think it's a fair to say that they will also have strayed over the border. They had passports. So this guy has had all the normal cockroachy oval shape that we know from the fossils. It's got all the little legs all around, as you expect. But what's weird about him is on his forehead, basically, is this fork, basically. Imagine a 3-pronged fork, and it's massive. It's got basically a trident on its head that's about the length of its own body.
Wow.
It's a weird little thing. It looks really funny.
That's hard? Is it a hard fork?
Well, it's a fossil, so...
Right, but it would have been made of shell or something.
It's highly likely that it would have been hard because it's been preserved. So generally the soft parts of these things don't get preserved.
Right.
Although there is an ammonite that has been found that the soft parts managed to somehow be fossilized. which is
No
quite
way.
interesting.
That's incredible.
It taught them a lot about the internal structure of an ammonite. Yeah, that was the rabbit hole that I went down.
That's great.
But yeah, so this creature is carrying around basically its own body weight in ridiculous fork. And that seems weird. But Rob Nell, being a biologist who works with beetles, has gone, hang on, that looks familiar. because he works with beetles. He often sees they have these huge antler-like structures.
Yeah.
He's gone, hold up, I think I know what that is. So he looks at the fossil and goes, I think that is evidence of sexual selection in ancient fossils. So what do we mean by sexual selection? The question is, why would this thing evolve with a giant fork on its head if it's not going to help it survive, basically? So we are all familiar, I think, with evolution mechanism of natural selection. So if you live longer, or if you have a mutation or an adaptation that makes you stronger or faster or more poisonous or in some way better fit to survive, that trait will tend to pass down, and that's how things evolve. We all comfortable with that as a concept?
Yes, sir.
So you're getting faster, that makes sense. You're more camouflaged, that makes sense. But some things seem to have evolved that seem to be the opposite of helpful. Let's take peacocks for an example, right? Peacocks have a gigantic great tail. That tail doesn't help them fly. It makes it very difficult to fly, actually. It doesn't help them evade predators. In fact, apparently, tigers have been known to sneak up on peacocks and put their foot on the tail. And then when the peacock tries to escape, no can do.
I mean, was this in a cartoon? It sounds like Wile E. Coyote.
It really does. This is all what I got from Paleocast, so do check it out. It is very interesting. But so the question is, how does what is effectively a survival inhibitor, this thing that doesn't help you at all, it's making you more vulnerable, get passed down from generation? You would think that would be wiped out in no time. So the theory is sexual selection. So it's not just whether you survive or not that matters, it's whether you reproduce, you mate, you find a partner who is willing to have the sex with you. Again, Jim, you've achieved this. Well done.
Twice.
So the reproduction counts. It's not just living, it's living and passing your genes on by mating with a partner. So some of these traits are believed to have evolved through sexual selection because they aren't directly useful for survival, but they do appeal to females. In the case of a male-dominated, it can go the other way, but it's often females. And therefore the appeal to females means that they reproduce and therefore it gets passed on and it passed on. So basically, women like a big tail. So even though I'm more likely to get eaten by a tiger, my big tail means I'm also more likely to hook up with a nice lady and make lots of baby peacocks. So the question sort of behind that is, why on earth would a female prefer something that clearly is going to make your babies have a harder time surviving? And probably the best theory at the moment for that is that the tail is what is called the handicap principle, right? So the tail of your peacock, or the huge antlers of your beetle or deer, or in this case trilobite, are an advert in a way for your general fitness. So what you're saying is, I am such a fit peacock, I'm so strong and fast and generally internally sound and the whole package, that I can afford to carry this great big tail around.
I can cripple myself and still...
Because I'm so great in all the other ways, I can carry this great big thing around. It's a sort of secondary indicator of your general fitness that means, if you had a heart condition, you probably couldn't hump a big tail around. So all of the things that you might not be able to see are kind of secondarily evidenced by your ability to survive whilst carting around a great big ridiculous billboard on your backside.
So if you were looking to find a partner, maybe what would be a good idea is to walk down the high street with a couple of dumbbells, like just pumping iron, going, look, I can do this. I'm so fit, I can walk down to the supermarket with my dumbbells.
I think that, but I think you see a more actually real example of that, because I can afford to buy this absurd sports car. Is equally an indicator that I am fit to be a partner of, because I can afford to blow my money on this ridiculous toy, and therefore, hey, come and get it, ladies.
It strikes me as being antler-like. Antlers are often used to sort of maintain your territory or to fight other rivals.
Yes, and that is another aspect of sexual selection, though, because it's other rivals, it's other rival males, right? It's not about defending yourself against predators, it's about fighting other males. So it's still an expenditure of effort to display your general wellness, if you like.
Or it's for a trilobite.
Ooh, dear, oh dear.
Trilobite.
Yeah, no, I got it. Anyway, Pete, what have you got?
So, to bring it back to our fossil, this giant fork sticking out of Wallicerops trifurcatus's head could well indicate that it is a male. So, what does fatherhood in the Paleozoic look like in this male? It's a big fork, that's what we understand. But I also asked Dave to help me understand fatherhood, right? That's who's the father. And Dave came back with this. I fully expect that being a father in the Paleozoic was centered around just spraying a load of sperm in the direction of a female laying eggs. So there you have it. A paleontologist speaks. That is fatherhood in Morocco, which is nearly Algeria, in the Paleozoic.
Well done.
I was wondering how you were going to get close to it. But that was a roller coaster ride towards it.
It really was. Well, look, Peter, an extraordinary out-of-office episode.
Thank you very much.
That, I think you have succeeded marvellously in talking about both Algeria, the time, the Paleozoic, and also fatherhood, bringing Jim along.
I'd like to thank you, Jim, for your time, effort, wisdom, and wit.
Well, I'm glad to offer at least one or two of those at some points. Probably not all together, though.
Jim, any final comments from you? Anything that you'd like to promote?
Just go to bewilderdad.com and look at some of the videos and stuff and give them a little like and then subscribe.
That's cool. We'll put a link into the episode description for this episode. And if you'd like to get in touch about any of the things that we've talked about on this show, or just to say hello, you can reach out to us through our website at HHEpodcast.com, or by email at peteandryan@HHEpodcast.com, or to bewilderdad at
Jim@bewilderdad.com.
We would love to hear from you, and you never know, you might end up featured on a future show.
And if you're on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, you can find us at HHE Podcast. And if you subscribe to one of those, you're going to get an alert every time we post one of our little 1-minute animated bites.
We'll be back again soon with the verdict, but until then, a huge thanks to Jim.
Thank you. It's been absolutely an honour being on this, and I genuinely mean that. I love this podcast. It's like I'm inside it. It's weird.
And a huge thanks to you, Peter.
Thank you, Ryan.
And that's it. I guess all that's left to say is...
You've been listening to...
History happened everywhere. Out of Office.
Hey, Jim.
Hey, Pete.
You're the bewildered dad, right?
Yeah.
So how do you deal with it? You know, when they're sulking and crying and complaining all the time and there's tantrums and screaming. You know, they just won't do what they're told and they're being a real handful and, you know, showing you up in public and stuff.
I know exactly what you mean. I mean, you're not alone. It's just really quite typical, but hopefully they'll grow out of it eventually. You just have to be supportive but strict. You've got to set those boundaries and don't let them push it.
Okay, right. Yeah, no, that's great advice. Thanks, mate.
Oh, no problem, because, you know, kids can be really tough.
Kids?
Hey, I want an ice cream.
Haven't finished your dinner!
It's not fair. I hate you.
Anyway, thanks, Jim. By the way, do you do babysitting?
No, I don't.
I think I pooped myself.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope.